people typically think, this attack on masculinity, the idea that masculinity is toxic, that probably went back to, say, the 1960s, second wave feminism. Actually, it starts much earlier than that. Before the Industrial Revolution, men worked with their wives and children all day. So, the cultural expectation on men focused very much on their caretaking role, that they were responsible. You had to be kind and gentle because you're working with your kids, you're working with your wife. So, how did that change? The Industrial Revolution took work out of the home. And of course, men had to follow their work out of the home into factories and offices. And for the first time, they were not working with people they loved and had a moral bond with, right? Their family members. Instead, they were working as individuals in competition with other men. And this is where you see the language start to change. For the first time, you see negative language applied to the male character. People began to complain, to protest that men were losing that caretaking ethos of the colonial era, that they were becoming egocentric, self-centered, aggressive, assertive, greedy, and acquisitive. I'm using the language of the day, and making a career their idol. They literally use that language as well, that men were starting to make their career their idol. Instead of working for their family, they were now working for personal enrichment, personal advancement, and financial success, and so on. And that is when you first start to see the literature, change and become negative. And of course, if that's the cause of it, it does suggest a solution. The solution is, can we reconnect men to their families? Even in industrial era, can we do more to reconnect men to the emotional life of their family?
But we're facing what is really a frontal assault against the family. It's having a detrimental effect, a toxic effect. So you've got some of these frontal assault things which threaten our children and grandchildren who may be exposed to this. And of course, we could talk more about even, the pervasiveness of pornography, online and through technology. But it's also subtle pressures. And even when it comes to things like gay marriage being, that legislation and how that undermines the definition of marriage and actually gives to the state power that they have no right to have, and that now they're wielding and are able to wield against traditional family cultures and structures. So, this is what our families are facing. And this creates all sorts of new problems and pressures. How do we navigate that? When it comes to issues of family marriage, I do think that there is a grassroots change that is taking place that makes me hopeful.
Is it ever right for us to identify ourselves by our sinful desires? Okay? And so some people want to say, well, I'm a same-sex attracted Christian. And one of the things I point out, as you say, is that we don't do that with other sinful desires by saying, I'm a what did I say? LTETM Christian, likes to eat too much. What prompted me to write the book? A sense that, a number of things, but one is a sense that people, Christians included, often seem to have lost the grasp of the fact that the Christian teaching on sex and identity and marriage is incredibly good news, and it is just really, really good news. And I think I got rather frustrated that a lot of what I was hearing from Christians kind of made it sound like Christian teaching is basically bad news, but it's worth living with it because there's good stuff that comes at the end. And I just think that's a real shame because God is good and his world is good, his design is good, he made us good. We're all desperately spoiled by sin. But the issue of sexuality and identity, it doesn't need to be avoided or apologized for, but rather actually it takes us straight to the heart of the gospel. And that I'm a Christian minister. My job is to explain to people day in, day out, week by week, not just explain, but proclaim the goodness of the fact that God sent his son to live again. And the point of this book is really to say that whole thing gives us a context for understanding humanity and what it means to be human that is just so much richer and better for everyone than anything that we're being offered.
In the heart of the whole education in this area, children are being taught about the intimacy of sexuality in such a way that it can actually freeze some children. It can do them great damage, because talking about intimate things in a class environment is not the most helpful way of speaking. So Alive to the World doesn't actually tackle that sort of thing. As I say, it already covers health, but it doesn't cover the intimacy of sexuality. And yet that is such a key part of who we are as people and of understanding who we are as we grow up. My book is called Sexuality Explained, and it's called A Guide for Parents and Children. And the idea is, again, it's done through stories. Any parent can pick it up, read through the stories, and help with their children's education.
Excellent. And what sort of age child is that aimed at? And I know it's very variable because these things are age sensitive and personality sensitive.
How right you are. It's starts pre-puberty and goes up into mid-adolescence. So it's not designed to be sort of one moment. It's designed over a period of time.
Great. Well, thank you for telling us about that, Louise.
So it's not written in any sort of, very complex or sophisticated language. It's written for regular moms and dads, because I am seeing so many hundreds of families that were just ambushed when their child came and made an announcement about being the opposite sex and wanting to go on, to medication and hormones. The parents were ambushed, meaning that they completely didn't expect it, and they just did not understand what it was about and how to respond. And so many of them made some decisions that they regretted. They thought that it was just a phase. They went along with it. They used a new name and pronouns. They may have taken their child to a gender therapist. I try not to use the language, because the language is really been so manipulated. And the purpose of manipulating the language is to change the way that we think. So when you use the word transition, it implies that there is some real change of sex, that someone could actually transition from being a boy to a girl or a girl to a boy, which of course is impossible. And, I'm very sad to hear that there are still parents who feel so lost and isolated, because it doesn't need to be that way. I would say, first of all, to these parents, that what you want to do is you want to affirm the child's emotions, but you do not want to affirm the child's beliefs. I may have other jobs, but being a parent is my most important job. So, and you want not only to say that, but obviously to do it, and to get educated, and to see that there are many, many options available to you outside of gender affirming care. Do not take your child to anyone that is going to practice gender affirming care.
Well, I wish I had caught on sooner. Let's just start with that. When I first started writing about marriage, I thought this was just about marriage. Kids need moms and dads. Like, that's when I was an anonymous blogger back in 2012. That was it. And it very, very quickly became clear to me that this was not just about marriage. If kids truly need their mother and father, which they do, then we've got a whole host of issues that have to be addressed from the perspective of the rights and well-being of children. One of those was divorce. One of them was cohabitation. One of them was having a very critical eye about these supposed studies that show no difference between two moms or two dads raising kids. One of them was the rampant, out of control commercialization and commodification of children through big fertility. And one aspect of big fertility is surrogacy, biology, adoption, and then intent. If I can assemble sperm, egg, and womb, and I intend to parent the child, I get parental rights and custody over a child that may or may not be related to me or the members of my household at all. Okay, so now you've set up that framework for parenthood, and that allows this absolute free-for-all in the big fertility marketplace for anyone and everyone with the money to acquire any kind of child without any kind of scrutiny. I have just found that we have to start looking at this as it actually is, not as a means of getting kids to people who are infertile, not as a means of leveling the playing field for those who find themselves in a minority sexual status or who are unwantingly single at a late stage of their life or willingly single during their life. This really is not about adults. It's not about adult fulfillment, not infertile heterosexual couples, nor the single or double or triple men that want to acquire children through this intentionally motherless process. This ultimately must be, like every marriage and family issue, this must be evaluated through the best interest of the child.
The books are 10 years apart, and the first takes what I call a microscopic look at the sexual revolution, that is, its effects on men, women, and children. And the second book opens the aperture to take in the wider frame, to say, what is this revolution doing to Western society, Western politics, and Christianity? We are talking right now and in these two books about trends that are affecting Western society, I think, for the worse. And that's what the evidence shows. It's not a personal opinion. And it's important to understand that now so many people have been affected by the sexual revolution, by the breakup of families, by the failure of families to form in the first place, that many people don't understand anymore why people lived in families to begin with. It is not enough to say what makes me thrive is irrelevant to the rest of you. What makes me thrive is something totally subjective. No, what is making the people in our upper classes thrive very often is that they are living in stable situations anchored by marriage. And so the work that you do and that the coalition does, bringing the benefits of marriage to other people, I think is especially critical at a time when people at the upper end of society seem to have abandoned both their understanding of what's important about marriage and their concern for what's happening at the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum. And not only there, the deleterious trends that we see shoot through societies, through the lower classes, middle classes, and upper classes, but you're quite right, they are most concentrated at the lower end. But I am hopeful, Tony, because I think that this is a very unnatural way that we have come to live. And that's why it's important for listeners to understand that we're not pointing fingers at people. We're not saying that you're a bad human being for the choices you might have made. We are saying, what has the accumulation of these choices in the direction of the sexual revolution meant for our societies and for individual happiness? I think if we approach the question that way, we will see where the correction will come from. It will come from individuals in possession of the idea that, hey, maybe there's a better way of doing this.
Some women don't seem to get that how men perceive them, if they're easy, is just sort of, it's they'll be happy to spend time with you until they decide that they want to spend time with somebody else, right? Marriage, I mean, I think it's off the table from the get-go because men understand, like, well, I'm going to marry because I want to commit to someone and I want them to commit to me. And she didn't commit it. I mean, she gave me her body with, at very little cost, right? It was cheap. And so he worries that, well, is that going to be the same thing in the future, right? She can worry about that being the same thing in the future for him, and he's a consistent risk of that, right? But I think men out there are probably not used to policing their wife, or at least thinking they ought to, right? But we're entering a world where, the kind of the rise of polyamory. Sex is cheap. I mean, that's the point of the book. It's made cheap because of the uptake of artificial contraception, which basically plunged the price of sex because pregnancy is super expensive as a life experience So it leveled the playing field with women and men in some ways, right? She could have sex like him, but she doesn't really want to have sex like him. And all of a sudden, the thing he was willing to pay for through effort, hard work, money, labors, etc., he didn't really have to pay for it anymore, or pay very little. So you've got that, you've got the sort of plunging uh, price of sex because of the higher quality of pornography. It more closely mimics real sex. Uh, and then online dating, which you can cycle through people super quick compared to, when I met my wife, there was one woman in my orbit who might have gone on a date with me, and that was it.
I think there are all these things that are being bombarded. I think a lot of our people have the sense that we're being bombarded on a daily basis with all this kind of crazy stuff. And it's like, it all seems like it's coming out of left field, but it's really coming from three things, three big ideas, and those three big ideas are interlocking. And they have lots and lots of specific spin-offs, but it can be boiled down to those three things which you just mentioned. And so I refer to it as the contraceptive ideology, which is the idea that it's a good thing to separate sex and babies, and that society should do everything possible to separate sex from babies. And then the idea that that it's perfectly okay to separate both sex and babies from marriage. Marriage is outdated. I'm sure your people hear this all the time. It's outdated, patriarchal. We don't need it anymore. All those old taboos, yada, yada, yada. I refer to that whole complex of ideas as the divorce ideology, because what's underneath it is the claim, very seldom made explicit, but now people are being more explicit about it. Kids don't really need their parents. Kids just need somebody to take care of their needs, and the identity of those people doesn't matter. Your biological connections don't matter. That's primitive stuff. That's like superstition, where we don't need that anymore. And so what that really does, if you buy that, what it really does is it gives adults leave to have sex with whoever they want to reorganize their sex lives, their living arrangements, because the kids will be fine, and that is unbelievably destructive. And I don't think it's possible to emphasize enough how destructive that is to children, for sure. But it's also destructive to men and women, because everyone really truly wants reliable love. So I call that the divorce ideology. And obviously it includes unmarried parenthood. It includes third-party reproduction, for sure. You go buy sperm and eggs. That's a radical separation of the child from the parent, right? And the things that you mentioned at the beginning, Tony, that when you said things happen, those are unavoidable. A certain number of things are unavoidable. But when people choose by choice, I can remember when this phrase came out, single mothers by choice, that they're making a conscious decision to go buy sperm from a catalog, and that's how they're going to start their family. That's something new. I mean, that's a very radical claim. And then finally, the whole issue about the significance of the sex of the body. And I refer to that as the gender ideology, which is basically the claim that the fact that we're male and female is something that is slightly offensive, frankly. I mean, I think a lot of people are offended by male and female, and by the fact that we're different in important ways and stuff, and that we should be past all that, and we should be able to override it in any way we want. And so feminism overwrote sex differences by saying men and women should be the same, equal all the time. And now transgenderism is saying we're going to override it by saying, well, you can change the sex of your body, So it's something insubstantial, and I think that's demonstrably incorrect, and it's making us crazy trying to live by that. So yeah, that's it. That's how I define the sexual revolution, Tony. I think it's undeniable at this date that all the things that were presented to us as if they were increases in freedom, they have all turned out to increase the power of the state over people's lives. And I think that's the point. And if you can't see it now, let me ask you this question. Who wants you to say Bruce Jenner is a woman? Who believes that? Okay. If the government can make you say Bruce Jenner is a woman, they can make you say anything.